Alright, so I've had quite a few comments underneath my videos. People are thinking about breeding ball pythons, and I've had a lot of questions asking which morph should I start out with, and that is a very good question. There's probably 300 different morphs of ball pythons. There is a whole bunch to choose from, and I want to narrow it down to my top 5 in this video. Pretty much 5 genes that I think would be excellent genes to start with when you're just starting into ball pythons. And probably what I would do is I would focus mostly on the dominant and the co-dominant morphs. I'd probably stay away from recessives. I'd say recessive is more of, it's more of a long-term project. And the other thing with recessive is, especially if you're just starting out, like for example, if you had a pied and a clown or something like that, and you start breeding it into other morphs, essentially what you'll get is you'll get hets, pretty much normal looking snakes that'll carry one copy of the recessive gene. And it's, I would say starting out, it might be a little discouraging, ending up with a whole bunch of ball pythons that all look kind of like normal ball pythons. As a matter of fact, this year I really focused on breeding a lot of recessives and got a lot of hets. And the funny thing is, you walk up to my table at the shows this year and all the ball pythons almost look like normal ball pythons, and there's all different prices all the way from the low end to, you know, a decent amount of money for some of the double hets. I actually produced some triple hets this year, probably almost like $1,000 snakes, and they look completely normal. And I would say, as far as a beginner, you're just starting out breeding ball pythons, it'd probably be a little bit discouraging ending up with a whole bunch of snakes that look normal. So I would probably stick with the dominant and the co-dominant genes. So in this video, I'm going to show you my top 5 that I think you should start with as a beginning ball python breeder. Alright, so probably my number 1 top pick for starting out in ball pythons would be a pastel ball python. And essentially pastel is, it's a co-dominant gene, so if you breed 2 of them together, you get a super pastel. And anything you breed this pastel to, 50% of the babies come out pastel. And pastel essentially brings in all the yellow color. It mixes really well with a lot of different genes. Also breaks up a lot of the pattern in a lot of ball python combos. And usually I would say that it really depends on the line of pastel. Some of them are really bright, some of them are not so bright. So when you're shopping around for a pastel, you might want to shop a little extra and try to get one that is a little more brighter than some of the others. And the pastels, I'd say usually, in most cases as adults, they brown out a little bit, but I've seen some really bright pastels as adult. You really want to start with the super bright hatchlings as far as getting into the pastel. And I'd say pastel has no genetic anomalies. It's probably the bread and butter of the ball python industry. There's no problems at all with head wobbles or kinking or duckbills or any of the genetic defects found in some of the other ball python morphs. You can't go wrong with pastel. Alright, number 2 on my list would definitely be Pinstripe. Pinstripe is an amazing gene. The funny thing about Pinstripe is they consider it a dominant instead of a co-dominant. If you breed a Pinstripe with a Pinstripe, they say you really can't get a super Pinstripe. Well, they said that for the longest time, and then finally I've seen some super Pinstripes for sale, and it's kind of an interesting, I don't know if they say the super Pinstripe looks pretty much like the regular Pinstripe. This guy's starting to run a little bit, which I don't really like in a snake that I haven't handled too much. I don't really want to get bit by this guy. I don't want to freak him out too much. So I'm going to move really slow, try to get him a little bit more comfortable with me. A lot of these hatchlings haven't been held that much. You only hold a hatchling for like 10 minutes and it calms down a lot. It's just a little bit kind of freaked out now because I just pulled it out of the rack. But the Pinstripes, I'd say, is another one that is really visually dominant when you mix it with other combos. You could definitely tell Pinstripe is in the mix when you mix it with just about anything. It's a really stunning standalone morph. I'd say Pinstripe is probably one of my favorite, just a standalone morph. It really keeps its color and the contrast into adult. So you see an adult Pinstripe and it looks almost exactly like this. Pretty much is pure gold of a snake that you can find. I would highly recommend the Pinstripe. All right, so number 3 on my list, this is a lesser ball python. And I'd say at first glance, it might look similar to a pastel. It has quite a bit of yellow in it. But let me tell you, when you mix it with certain combos, it does not mix the same as pastel. It is completely different. And if you breed a lesser with anything in the blue-eyed leucistic, what you end up with is an all-white snake with bright blue eyes, a really stunning snake. So to make that, you can actually breed a lesser with a lesser, or a lesser with a Mojave or a phantom or a bamboo or anything in the blue-eyed leucistic, and you get the blue-eyed leucistic, the all-white snake with blue eyes. And I would say you could pick, you know, any of these you can pick up really cheap at the shows. I would say a lesser, probably like this, you're looking at like maybe $150, something like that. And then if you actually, you know, got like a female ready to breed, you're probably looking at $250 to $300 at the low end to start. And you know, they could probably go up from there depending on how ready they are to breed and how big they are, because you could have a return on investment right away. But I'd say as far as a standalone morph, the lesser is extremely impressive. Mixes really well with a lot of combos. I'd say hands down, this would be great for a beginner ball python breeder. Alright, so here is number 4 on my list, and the only reason this isn't number 1 because it's a little more expensive than the other snakes that I showed you. I'd say a bamboo, you're probably looking at, you know, for hatchling bamboo, I was actually selling these anywhere from pretty much, I don't really want to quote prices because the prices always change, but I'd say at today's current market, you're looking probably at anywhere from $250 to $500 for a hatchling bamboo, depending on where you get it from and the intensity and the certain line of bamboos. As a matter of fact, this one is Bobby's baby. it's a hatchling from Bobby. Bobby is the ball python that I have around my neck, and for some reason I actually spent quite a bit more money for Bobby because he was a really high contrast bamboo, and all the babies come out super intense with a really high contrast. Probably better than most of the bamboos I've seen. As a matter of fact, I've seen some bamboos for sale at the shows for quite a bit less than I'm selling them for, and they're really quite a bit duller and browned out than this particular line of bamboo. And you know, bamboo's pretty much my number 1 snake that I sell. You know, pretty much kick-started my whole breeding operation with the bamboo. I produced a lot of these, and just as a straight standalone morph, I'd say bamboo is one of the most impressive. You breed this to anything and 50% of the babies come out bamboo. It's co-dominant, and this is also in the blue-eyed leucistic, so if you breed it with a lesser, or if you breed 2 bamboos together, you can get an all-white snake with blue eyes. That is the super bamboo. I would highly recommend considering the bamboo if you're just starting up breeding ball pythons. Alright, so this is number 5 on my list. This is a coral glow ball python, and I would say it's probably one of the most impressive standalone morphs. It almost looks like an albino, but it's probably the closest you can get to an albino, but this is actually co-dominant. So everything you breed this to, 50% of the babies come out coral glow. And if you breed 2 coral glows together, you get a super coral glow, which is essentially looks kind of like a faded out coral glow. You really can't tell that much of a difference between a super coral glow and just the straight coral glow. But if you breed the super to anything else, 100% of the babies come out coral glow. And this is, I actually used to say, you know, the coral glows were essentially the same as the banana, but the interesting thing is I had this coral glow at the last reptile show. There's a lot of people around me that actually had the banana, and let me tell you, there is definitely a difference, especially as the hatchlings seemed like the bananas were a lot more faded and washed out than the coral glow. So I'm starting to think there is a difference. Maybe coral glow, maybe this particular line is just a really more intense line of coral glow compared to everybody else's bananas. And the interesting thing about coral glows is it's a sex-linked gene. So if you breed this, this is actually a male maker because the father was a male, and then this is a male. So every single hatchling that comes from this male will actually be a male instead of a female. It's really rare that you'll actually get a female coral glow anymore. It seems like almost all of them are males, which is really interesting. All right, so it is time for the question of the day. And Ball Python Addiction asks, what is the youngest male ball python that you've paired up? And that is a very good question. Essentially, I wouldn't pair up my males until they are at least 1 year old, and they pretty much have to be a minimum of 500 grams. Most of my 1 year old males here in my collection reach pretty much anywhere from 600 to 800 grams. And I actually bought a couple males online on Morph Market, thinking I was going to breed them right away, and come to find out some of those were actually about 400 grams. And I went ahead and paired them up anyway. As a matter of fact, I had one last year paired up at 400 grams, and it actually bred quite a few females because it actually came up to the 500 gram mark as I was feeding it into the breeding season. So it worked out pretty well. But I'd say most breeders don't breed less than 1 year old and anything less than 500 grams. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.